that the standing of the Mets has had a huge effect on our generation. I think that the way that a lot of Mets fans of my age are brought up makes it so that our fandom is not dependent on the success of the team. We can't really get too nostalgic about it and say, I remember the good old days when we would go to the stadium and every day the Mets would win. 20 games in a row or something that was inflated by our memory. We really don't have anything like that. It sounds a bit depressing when I maybe say it like that. It means that the reasons why we're rooting for the team can't be because we're bandwagoning, and it's not something that we can be attacked on. We don't just root for the team because they have championships. If we did, that would be silly.
This is the grown-up room, see? This is not the baseball room. So we have here all of the grown-up things and the artwork and the Bar Mitzvah albums. Although I can show you, if you look closely at Ross's Bar Mitzvah photo, you will see that his yarmulke did have it was blue and orange and did have the NY logo on it. He did have a Mets-themed Bar Mitzvah party. Actually, it says Ross's Bar Metsvah, and that was the logo for his Bar Mitzvah. And we still have some of these. They're insulated lunch bags. Here actually is one of the table numbers from the Bar Metsvah. This would have been, of course, the Tom Seaver table. That was our table. We sat at table number 41.
And Ross was at the head table, which was Shay.
As everybody came in and picked up their little seat assignment, the seat assignment card was also in the shape of a Mets jersey, a little miniature Mets jersey. That was kind of cute.
I think about fans who are 30 years old or younger. You've been around, you've seen the team. It's quite possible you've watched the Mets for 25 years now, never seen them be world champions. Chances are you've lived in this city where you've seen the other team be world champions a bunch of times, and every year almost go to the playoffs. That really gets on your nerves. And the sense that, when is this going to change? A sense of running in place.
In relation to other fans, we've spent at least 3 hours with fans of pretty much every other baseball team going to other stadiums. I think that a lot of fans might be as dedicated to their teams as far as purchasing gear and coming out to the games and learning the nuances of their team's history. Maybe something that would set the Mets apart and the Mets fandom apart is maybe something that's developing right now. The fandom has had to craft some of its own history since, for instance, if we were to go to Pittsburgh, to the wonderful stadium they have there, there's so much history that they have to draw upon, and the organizations have gotten to maybe rally around that and draw upon that for their team. We've had to craft some of that ourselves, and in that way maybe less equipped at times, much like the Mets themselves in certain years.
Do you think that the Mets were slow in general to pick up on how much the history of the team meant to the fans?
Oh, yeah.
Maybe the biggest example of the Mets being slow on history would be the opening of Citi Field. The fans were very vocal that the organization didn't do enough to make it a Mets stadium. And thankfully, the next few years, they were able to make it more of that, and they were able to hang their playoff banners where people would actually be able to see them, as opposed to just hidden in the bullpen gate.
Well, in the very beginning, the flags weren't there at all. Eventually, the Mets hung them in the Apple Bullpen Plaza area, and I remember Greg Prince commenting in a column that it's like the wife telling her husband, fine, you can put up the trophies, but in the garage, not where anyone can see them.
Why do we have to beat management over the head to get them to care about the history of the team?
They don't seem to have an appreciation. That's very different from when I grew up as a kid. I remember the old-timer games back in the early 70s when the Mets were still a new team. They would bring in the old Dodgers, the old Giants, and the old Yankees, and there was such a commemoration of New York baseball history during those days, not just during the old-timer days, but it was always a presence among this team, and that's something that has been totally lost.
They made some great characters who have been part of the Mets team. They're kept alive by the memories of the Met fans. How come we never see them? You're right. I mean, we could have an old. I mean, the Mets have been around plenty long enough to have an old timers game. I mean, bring back Turk Wendell to come throw some innings. Bring back Al Leiter. Bring back Mookie. Not just the '86 players, but there were great players on the teams in the late '90s, and even going back into the '70s. There was some interesting and colorful characters, and we've totally lost touch with them because the team does nothing to bring them into our present.
Management doesn't seem to have any sense of nostalgia, and that's what created the fan base in the first place back 40, 50 years ago.
New York was unique before the Mets came along, because it had had 3 teams forever. And then, of course, the Dodgers and Giants left for various reasons, most of which were monetary. They went to California. New York was left without National League Baseball. And that really meant something in those days. So today it's more of a bookkeeping thing. We have 15 teams in one league, 15 teams in the other. In those days it really meant a lot. And the fact that you had these orphaned Giant fans, these orphaned Dodger fans, people who would have hated each other, did hate each other through 1957. Now had nothing left to do. Nobody became a fan of the remaining New York team, or at least not too many people did, because it was just a whole different vibe. It took some doing. It took 4 years to create an expansion team. Enter the Baby Mets in 1962. They started to play just about the day I was conceived, I'm pretty sure. I never asked my father, I never asked my mother to try to put a date on it, because I think that would be creepy. But they started playing on April 11, 1962. I was born at the end of that December. I'm told I arrived a little early, put it all together. I think I came along in some sense the exact moment the Mets first took the field in St. Louis. So, the Mets filled in.
Stand up and loosen up those muscles and join Mr. Met and see me take me out to the ball game as Fisher Nuts presents the 7th inning stretch for Freshness UDC and Think Fisher.
Thanks, Ed.
Beautiful.
Acid oxide.
So one of the nice things about being a Mets fan when you're collecting is that it doesn't have to be Mets, as long as it's blue and orange. So this happens to be a cocktail glass from a cruise that we took, and it just happens to be blue and orange. So, hey, it goes on our bar if it's blue and orange. That's
This was what we made for the Banner Day 2012, which was the first Banner Day in how many years?
It was the first Banner Day since 1996, so the first Banner Day after you were born. And,
That's true. I hadn't even thought about that.
So,
The first banner day of his life.
in commemoration of the Great War of 1812, or maybe it's just the fact that it fit, we have our War of 2012. And Mr. Met is shooting baseballs at the other members of the National League East.
Ross and I both carried this banner out onto the field at Citi Field and paraded it around, and it was just a tremendous amount of fun. I was shocked about how many people were there. There were 400 or so Met fans all lined up outside the stadium before the game. But what a day. That was just so much fun. I mean, the love of the Mets and the camaraderie of all those fans was just amazing. There was no sense of competition. We were all just out there, and everybody loved everybody else's banners. Everybody was complimenting everybody else on what a great job they did. It was just a celebration. And
There's a lot of joy having the event back after all these years.
Yeah, it was terrific. It's the fans. That's what makes it. Forget the front office and the Mets management, which sometimes doesn't seem to know which way's up. But the fans are great. The fans are fabulous.
The Mets fan of 1962 was an amalgamation of people who had been abandoned and people who wanted something new. I think one of the interesting things that happened in 1962 was, sure, you were bringing in the abandoned Dodger fan and the abandoned Giant fan, but you also had this new breed. Maybe hadn't been old enough or hadn't really cared that much about the Dodgers or Giants. The Mets were sort of invented for them. They got a product that wasn't any good whatsoever. A team that came out of the gate losing its first 9 games. It wasn't just an unlucky streak. The team went on to have a record of 40 wins and 120 losses, which is about as bad as it's ever gotten. While there was certainly their share of boring 7-1 defeats, a lot of it became the stuff of instant legend. Balls through the legs and pick-off plays that went awry and rundowns that were never completed. Pitcher after pitcher after pitcher being taken out by Casey Stengel. Instead of turning their back on that, instead of saying, we're New York, we deserve something better, they embraced it. They said, you know what, this isn't perfect, but neither are we. And it may have been an early attempt at irony. I think irony would only take you so far. I don't think you would have drawn as many as you did in those days without some real affection. By the time they moved into Shea Stadium in '64, the template was set. This team isn't perfect, we're not perfect, but we're in this together. They would call that brand equity today, and they wouldn't know what to do with it. But in those days, I think that was the sort of thing money couldn't buy.
Well, as Ross said, there's a tenacity. We're there. We've seen a lot of bad times, and we still stick around. And I think that that says a lot about us.
I'll give you a perspective as somebody who didn't grow up as a Mets fan. There's a lot of Met history that I missed because I didn't really become a fan until 1979. I will still be around Met fans who lived through 1969 and the concept of the manager deciding to pitch Tom Seaver on 3 days rest in Game 6. And
1973.
Excuse me, 1973, not 69, 73 in the World Series against Oakland, right? Yeah, okay. It was again before my Mets time, and it was it Yogi?
Yes, damn Yogi. We've had this discussion many times.
We've had this discussion, but it's. I mean, I will hear Met fans talking about this is now 40 years ago that the Yogi Berra made a decision, which, in a historical context, you can see the logic.
Seaver never pitched well in 3 days rest.
I know that, but the logic of saying, okay, I'm going to take my best pitcher, I'm going to pitch him in Game 6, and if we lose Game 6, then I've got my second best pitcher who can come back and pitch Game 7. And there are Met fans, some of which are in this room, who will just still clench their fists and scream, how could Yogi have done that? And the passion and the emotion that still exists 40 years later for an event like that is just amazing to me. I have told some of my Met fans when we've had this discussion, it's 40 years ago, get over it. And the answer is no! I don't want to get over it. and that's what it's all about, I think, to be a Met fan, is that you have these strong connections and these strong feelings, and I can now feel the same way about events that have happened in my time as a Met fan, and it's an amazing thing.
Well, as my friend Taryn Cooper, who's a blogger, put it, her first blog was called My Summer Family, and I love that as a term. It's a great way of thinking of our friends that we met through our fandom.
I find, as a writer and a blogger and a fan, talking to other fans, writing for other fans, you sort of fall back on that legacy and that history of just saying, you know what, it's going to be okay. We've been through this before. Really, you have to catch people in the right mood for that sort of thinking to take hold. Because otherwise you're saying, I don't want to hear about 1962. I don't want to hear about 1969. Tell me that things are going to be better in 2014 or 2016. All you can do is say, I don't know. Maybe they'll get, the young players will grow into something, and the old players won't pass from the scene, and the manager will know what he's doing, the GM will make great trades, and there'll be purse strings loosened. You can't say that. All you're left with is, I gotta believe.
ha ha.